So it has been a while since we've met, but the first one up is, and we spoke, I don't even know how many times ago, about the mean time to merge chart. And so Matthew has filtered that now to the top 200 projects, and it still looks flat, I think is the word I want to use. Like relatively unchanged. Oh, there's interesting. There's a new chart for the top 100 projects that's in there. But it doesn't really move as a measure on either chart if you take a look at them. And so I'm not sure there's more to dig into on that, or if we care, if we want to keep it as the metric, or if we want to come up with a new metric, or how we're thinking about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. What is like the top 200? What is the measure for being in the top?
Number of MRs. Same measure that we use to find the top 200 projects to then go do the mean to go find the large MR. So it's like the number of merge requests merged over like the last 30 days or something. Basically trying to make sure that that's an active project versus a like inactive project.
I don't know if this helps, but I was I was reading some months ago something related to the number of reviewers in a project and all of these different aspects. And I mean, to no surprise, the number of reviewers versus the number of merge requests had a big effect on how long it took to merge something. So it might be interesting as well to know how many people are reviewing things in these projects, right? Because they might be suffering from a lack of reviewers, right? But yeah, I don't know what how to interpret this, to be honest. Should we be looking more at these top 200 projects than just the mean time to merge?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason I sort of wanted to look at it in the top 200 projects was, in theory, those are active projects, right? And so if we believe we've been contributing features to the merge request experience over the last 2 years that would have improved efficiency, you would have expected potentially that this number declined in some amount, right? And so I was hoping that maybe we would see that within the top 200 projects, as opposed to what we potentially see is that over the past 2 years that we've been contributing features, the mean time to merge has actually increased ever so slightly for all of these projects. And so maybe we're not contributing to like a more efficient process, and there's something else is going on here. And so I think that was the original reason to look into it. I think looking at it, if you go up to the one that has like all of SaaS, it's basically the same story, right? Like it starts a little bit lower than it is today, but in general, over the course of 2 years, like it varies some hours, but I wouldn't consider the difference between 20 and 21 hours to be incredibly significant. And so I think it's just, I think the original context of this was like, is this the right metric? I guess I guess I don't know. I guess I don't have a good answer for that because it still doesn't really tell us anything. Yeah, there's still, yeah, it still doesn't really tell us anything.
Yeah, I think it's. I think we should. I don't know if it should be the main metric. I think the main metric should be user happiness, right? Because that like has everything attached to it. This is something that we need to look at because if it changes over time to be less, it's good. If it doesn't change in the positive side and it becomes worse over time, we need to take more attention to it. So I think that it's good that we have this and we can keep looking at this every now and then. But I do feel that the duration of merge, so like here we're looking at speed, how fast we can get something merged, is I don't know if there's a relationship or a similar relationship with what I've been studying for the perceived performance, where people like a product being fast or something happening fast or slow is not as important as people being satisfied, right? So and then there's this disconnect, and sometimes things that are slow make people happy, but then other things that are slow, people are not as happy because maybe that duration is not as well filled with other things. So to say it in another way, let's imagine that the mean time to merge was this high because people were very inefficient and were always facing roadblocks and things to work around when they were using merge requests. That would lead to a very unsatisfactory experience, and so people would be pissed off and would not like the experience. But maybe the current mean time to merge is the way it is, and people are still happy because they're as fast as possible as they can be, and they're happy with the experience, and they know that it can't get faster than this maybe. So I think in the end we need to compare this with other metrics to know if we're doing well or not. I think by itself it doesn't tell us much unless it was complete, it has a trend. Like if there was a trend, we definitely needed to look at it. But if it doesn't, it's not necessarily telling us that it's good, but it's also not telling us that it's bad. Like it's, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that makes sense. I think we've ruled out needing to dig further into it for now. And yeah, we do need to keep looking at what else we should be measuring to sort of validate some of this. So yeah, thanks. I think you've got the next one.
Yeah. So here's a plan, and I wanted to run this by you to understand if it makes sense, if there's something else that we could be missing here. So today I talked with Anne Lash, one of our UX researchers, and she's filling in for Catherine on a few things. And one of them is this issue about measuring merge request perceived performance. And there's essentially three things that we're looking at, or that we're thinking about looking at, to build a holistic picture. So the first one is machine reported, and we can look at GitLab only, and we do that by focusing on the LCP, which is the largest contentful paint, in addition to other metrics. And this is something that I've been already tracking, fortunately, for in all of our performance tests, and that we're tracking now with the large merge requests test sample. This becomes, and so that's the machine reported, but this becomes more difficult if we want to compare it with competitors. And I think a boarding solution could be to rely on ForgePerf, because it runs weekly or daily. I'm not sure. I think weekly. And although the test samples are not they are not representative of large merge requests, or we can't control the test samples, but at least they are consistently applied across tools as much as possible. So, I mean, some tools have certain features that other tools don't, so that might affect things. But in the end, it gives us some indication of how well GitLab compares to others, given the same conditions, more or less. So I think that's something that we can take a look at, and not necessarily as an official input, but something that is more secondary, and say, hey, if you want to look at competitors, there's this, and maybe over time. And I think they also have a history page where you can look at it, and we can look and see how well things have been progressing. Yeah, I'll stop there if one of you has comments or questions about this machine reported metrics. Okay. And then the other thing is that I was trying to get away from is the human reported, and you see that in point C, but we'll get to that in a minute. And so I tried to focus on task times to be as objective as possible, because when you ask humans how long something took to load, you'll get a different answer, probably every day, right? So people are really bad at estimating durations and how long things took to load. And yeah, it gets increasingly complex as we add more variables to this. So I thought, okay, let's just look at task times. And so one of the methods that is used for this is KLM. So it's a keystroke level modeling. And it's basically, it's very simply just over years and years of research, researchers have come up with specific average time durations for specific actions or operators. So for example, looking at something on the screen usually takes this amount in milliseconds. Reaching out for your mouse usually takes this amount in milliseconds. And so all of these small things, you can add all of them together. And apparently it gets to 10 to 20% of the actual time when you try to use this to predict a skilled user's task time without errors, right? And so we could use this to predict how long a power user would take to create a merge request, request a review, or even review a merge request, and use this for not only GitLab, but also competitors. And the thing is not looking at the actual duration. So it doesn't matter if it takes 10 seconds or 100 seconds in GitLab. What matters is it takes 10 seconds in GitLab today, and when we release new improvements, it now takes 9 seconds, or it took 100 and now it takes 50. So it's the comparison between versions of GitLab and between GitLab and its competitors that matters. So it's that difference percentually, not so much the actual number in milliseconds. And so that's why, because the measurements themselves, like the duration of like putting your hand on the mouse or looking at the screen or typing something or clicking on something, those will depend a lot. But the difference, if you will always use a consistent method, we are able to predict with a fair amount of certainty how long it would take for users to use this. And this can help paint this picture of perceived performance, because of what I was saying in the beginning. Maybe people can also think that a product is slow, not because of the response times, but because it's slow for them to do things, right? So they're thinking that the product is slow when actually they are performing slowly when carrying out those actions. This all of this makes sense. I tried to explain it as clearly as possible.
I was like skimming the link that you provided. Is that moderated testing? How do you do it, I guess, would be my question. Like how
Oh,
complicated is
right.
it to do and measure?
Right. So it's very simple. So there's a source where that has all of these operators, how long it usually takes to reach the mouse, to look, to click, and basically you have a script that details every single thing that a user needs to do, and you just sum those durations. And I actually found an awesome tool for this, and that allows us to repeat this how often we would like. So it's called Cogulator, and it's an open source tool. And basically, you just write a scenario here, or even this one. This one is I think easier to understand. You write the goal, press the new button, and then the things that are in blue, the words in blue, will count as durations. So everything you see here, look, think, hands, type, verify, keystroke, all of these have a default duration attached to them. And so the whole duration of doing all of these things would be 11 seconds for someone who's an expert, right? And if here I type something like this, the task time now changes because I'm typing more letters. So this is just an example, and you can do this for whatever you'd like. And this is more easier to reproduce, and it would get us within 10 to 20% of the actual time. And it's much simpler than running tests with actual users. And if we were to try to do this for competitors as well, it would blow up and we would take a long time to recruit the users and have a stable environment for testing and try to do this every time we release something.
So so you don't actually, like, is the tool that you just showed, is that the extent would be like writing those scenarios in there, and then we would say, that's how long this should take?
No. So that's why I don't want us to get too hung up on the actual duration. So maybe that's something we could strive for, but the most important thing is the relative duration between like GitLab 14.0 and then in GitLab 14.0, 14.1, we release, I don't know, an improvement to creating a merge request in the interface. So now we change that scenario to what it looks like today, and we notice that there's a 10 or 20% difference in the task time, right? So it's not the actual seconds, is the comparison between one version of GitLab and the other where we've made improvements, and also between products, right? So it's not about saying that GitHub, it takes 200 seconds and in GitLab, it takes 100. It's the difference between them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But like, there's no one actually, like, this is based on sort of like industry standards for those blue keywords that basically we define the scenario and then we do that. And then if we change something in the way that you would work through that scenario, we update that file and we say, this is the new steps that you would take. And that either increased or decreased the thing. Okay, got it. So
Yes.
it's something we would just maintain sort of like on our own. It doesn't involve user
Yes.
testing. And then it's sort of, okay. Okay, cool. I'm trying to get a better feel of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's an input. It's not perfect, as it says. Like the research shows that it has a 10 to 20% margin of error, but it's something. And again, I don't think it's really important for us to focus on the actual time. Although it's interesting, it's more the comparison over time as we release improvements and with competitors. And then the final one is the human report. And so this is something that Anne has had experience when she worked at Google, and she suggested using the HATS method, which is basically, and you might have stumbled upon this yourselves when using Google products. Sometimes they have that popover or that banner that says, hey, we'd like to hear your thoughts about, I don't know, Gmail or Google Calendar or whatever. And it's basically an in-product survey invite that would be specific to merge requests. that would have allowed us to get responses from users in the context that they're using the product. And this would allow us to mitigate the biases that usually occur when you ask people about experiences after the fact. So when they're in the product and they're using the merge request experience, we would ask them to rate their satisfaction and how they would rate the performance of the merge requests. We haven't defined the questions yet, but it would be something like this. And according to a paper that was published on that method that Google has been maturing for many years now, it seems to be a good input. Well, not perfect, because there are always biases and subjectivity with human reports, but it's yet another input for this holistic picture, if that makes sense. And for competitors, we wouldn't look into that yet because it's very challenging. It would be a lot of work, and I don't know if it would be that helpful at this point in time.
What is next steps?
So next steps is what I'm going to do is break down that issue into, or create it and promote it to an epic and create separate issues for these things, for the machine reported task times and human reported. And then also want to create a handbook page where we would collect these inputs and explain how you can read and interpret them to make decisions. And these would run independently from one another. So for example, the machine reported, we already have all of the information that we need. So we don't need to get that information. We're already tracking all of that in our performance tests. So that's done. What we would need to do then is just add that information into a single source of truth in the handbook so that people can look at it and we can compare it over time. The task times is something that I would need to do for specific tasks, like creating a merge request, requesting review, and reviewing a merge request, not only for GitLab, but also some competitors. And then the in-product survey invite would be another initiative that I don't want that to block the rest, but it would depend because we will probably need some engineering capacity to implement this in the product. So yeah, right now we're in this planning phase and we'll see how that goes, basically. Yeah, Kai, you were going to say something? If not, we can move to Sanjan.
So this is just FYI that I have interviewed several developers. Most of them were the maintainers. They like the waiting for concept, and they still like to have the indicator for the reviewer state. So I'd like to mingle these two concepts into the design. And long story short, we are going to having the unmoderated test using the user testing that come with the external user, and then it's good to go. Any question, Kai? Because Pedro, we have already discussed quite a few times.
I left a comment under the, you left like some interesting findings, and you had one of them was like the most users rely on email notifications. If that is the email notification like the first notification that they rely on, or like what is their triage process like after that notification? Like to me, that seems like that is the piece that feels like what waiting for solves is like after your initial notification, like how do you deal with that? Or is it that every engineer, which I would find suspicious at best based on what I see in daily stand-ups, is that like they get an email notification for a review request and they go and they immediately take care of it and then unassign themselves, and then the next time they get an email notification it's because they've been assigned as a reviewer. Like how do they know like where they are in the flow after that first email notification?
So firstly, what I was amazed by their response was like they normally remember which MR they're assigned to, and even which MRs they are like assigned as reviewers. I was really surprised to hear those type of responses because they're great. And I think most of them like just replied to me that like I'm using email as the primary tool because like I think it's mostly the very first signal, like you're assigned as reviewer, and most of the time they will have like several different discussions from different reviewers, different maintainer. So they got a couple of emails. So I think it's the first signal, or in the middle of the MR is in the review process. But I think this is just coming from like 80% of the survey responses from 26 respondents, so which is not that many. And also the interviewees that I have talked to is like, they're not just relying on the email because they don't think it's enough. So I think there are clear some needs that if we provide additional signal to them and then they will use it. So I find it like there are clear needs because that's the reason why they rely on to-dos as a secondary tool. And if we provide this feature, then they don't need to find those information in the to-dos. They can just see the waiting for you some patches and then they can just hit. And I think the maintainers who have involved in several different projects, I think there are a couple of developers are in this situation. They want this feature, especially. So that's what I've heard. And I was happy that they like this feature. They like this concept, but the only downside is like just a visual problem. So I'm working on it, and Pedro and I working on this review cycle. And then if it is ready to go, then we're good to go with the external user with the moderated test, which is faster than usual.
Cool.
Yep.
I appreciate the update. That is, that's good. That's positive. So hopefully we'll, yeah, hopefully we'll crank things out and be able to start working on this once we get through performance land.
And also, David provided me very nice feedback. We had a sync meeting regarding this feasibility, and we have discussed like what is a potential problem for those solutions, and that really helped me a lot to understand the backend strategy. So, yeah, I'd like to also highlight that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah,
you connected with David.
Yeah, yeah. I shared about the number of merge requests per day, and the GitLab roulette. It has the average number of assignments, so not necessarily how many are assigned at the moment, but you can, if you filter, for example, for reviewer backend, here at the bottom it says how many on average are assigned to all backend reviewers at the moment. So 1.5 is the number of MR reviews currently assigned. And for backend maintainers, that's 2.2 merge request reviews currently assigned. So yeah, this is a more data centric approach to that.
Yes, thank you for putting this together. And you see that there are some gaps that like, this is what they responded to me. I think I have like 6 MRs per day, but actual data looks quite different. So perceived numbers and the actual data might be different sometimes. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, just a very quick note to wrap up. The merge request widget workflow interviews. Catherine did an amazing job doing the interviews, but she wasn't able to wrap up all of the insights. So I'm going to involve Ian Camacho, who is the designer leading the whole merge request widget initiative, to try to have him complete the insights. And there are some insights already there, but I don't think she was able to finish them. And once that is done, we will report back on next steps for the merge request widgets.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. And now with Catherine gone, I think it'll be good to. Yeah, it'll be nice to get this wrapped up and see where we're at with it. So thanks for taking it over and shepherding it through the end. But yeah, awesome. We're at time. We're a little bit over, but thanks everyone. It's good to see you. And Peter, you'll be off, it looks like, next week. So maybe we'll move things around again, or we'll figure something out.
Only from Wednesday. Yeah, only
Okay.
from Wednesday on. So Tuesday we will still be able to meet at this time.
I think I'm off Tuesday, so we'll figure it out.
If you want to move it to Monday, I'm also okay with that.
And Monday's a US holiday, so no. We'll figure it out. We'll catch up.
Don't worry.
We'll catch up at some point again in the future. But it's good to see everyone. Enjoy your time off, and thanks for all this.
You too. Enjoy it, Kai.
Bye.
See you, Sanjay. Bye-bye.
Yeah.